This is The Villain's Demand. I'm JVD, bringing you another comic book review over Pacific Rim Tales from the Drift from Legendary Comics. First of all, if you have not seen the movie Pacific Rim by now, shame on you. That movie's been out for 3 years now. If you want to watch it, better yet, there's a graphic novel called Tales from Year Zero that gives you more of a backstory for all the characters involved in the movie that will make them more enjoyable. So if you haven't watched it, get to reading that and then buy the movie. Before I continue with my review, here's a small summary of the plot. The story is centered around Duc and Kaori, the husband and wife duo who pilots the jaeger Tacit Ronin. While defending Tokyo from a kaiju, their mech is damaged, causing massive radiation leakage and leaving the two to merge in and out of the drift. While in this predicament, you travel their memories through the drift as it reveals how they were destined to be together in more ways than one. The two are saved by Coyote Tango, another jaeger, which helps put down the monster. Pentecost informs the two that any more combat will kill them after suffering severe nerve damage from the radiation. Another kaiju approaches Tokyo, and the two suit up to sacrifice their lives in aid of defeating the beast. Now, I believe if you love the movie Pacific Rim, for the monster battles, and this comic probably isn't for you. The action's there, but it seems really muddy in my opinion. All the battles take place in water, and the splashing around hides a lot of the movement between the jaeger and the monsters. But overall, I really enjoyed the book once I got past the first 2 issues. Those two move at a really slow pace, and it's showing you the havocs and dangers pilots face when in a damaged jaeger. Afterwards, it focuses on the bond required between two pilots to manage the drift. If you watch the movie, this is touched on just a little, but it's more focused on action, where this comic is exactly the opposite. In my opinion, if Legendary is going to release more books based in the world of Pacific Rim, it needs to find a good balance between the two, or better yet, give you 2 different stories, one based on the drift, one based on action. In the story, there's 3 jaegers, Tacit Ronin being the main one, Coyote Tango, as I mentioned, and another called Victory Alpha make brief appearances. With the stories taking place about a decade before the film, you kind of see how jaegers have evolved. It seems in their early stages they were either based on close or ranged combat, not a balanced mix of both. Ronin and Victory seem very melee heavy, as their arms have long swords. You see very little firepower come from the two, whereas Coyote Tango has massive cannons on its shoulders. You don't really get to see these in action, but you can imagine the amount of damage they would inflict on a monster. There are also 3 kaiju as well. I assume they're all category 2, seeing how the final one is considered larger than the 2 previous. The bigger the monster, the higher the category, so maybe Ragnarok, the final kaiju in the book, is the last before any level 3s would emerge in the history of Pac Rim. The first in the opening issue has no name mention, Attack or Attack, depending on how you want to pronounce it, is the one given to the one laying a beatdown on Tacit Ronin, the beginning of the in the middle of the book, I should say. This kaiju is very different from the previous and the final one, as it seems to have blade-like appendages on its bodies to evenly match the jaegers it's been facing. But before, the one that's not named in Ragnarok seemed to be based on bludgeoning the armor of jaegers. Their bodies and appendages are very round and shaped, and they seem to be ending in hardened bone, is what my guess is. Which is kind of strange. These are level 2 kaiju, and in the movie they're all level 4, except for Slattern, who's a level 5, the first of his kind. They're all based on your typical giant fleshy body. They're all teeth and claws, and they're all heavily influenced on animals. That seems to be the theme with all the monsters in the movie and in the pre-graphic novel for their design. So this either says two things about the kaiju in this book based on the kaiju in the movie. Either the aliens who are trying to conquer Earth decided to get creative with their monsters every now and then, or the artist wanted to leave his mark on the world of Pac Rim by making his monster stand out. Who knows? You can be the judge on that. Honestly, I kind of think it's a bit of both. On the note of kaiju designs, Ragnarok, the last kaiju in the book, bears a very striking resemblance to Goro from Mortal Kombat. And if you play Mortal Kombat, he doesn't look nothing like an animal. So that goes on what I was just saying about these monsters in these books don't look like the animal-like monsters from the Pacific Rim movie. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the main focus for the story is the drift. First, while battling Attack, however you pronounce it, I'm not Japanese, Duc constantly moves in and out of the drift while being connected with Kaori. You get to see this in the film between Riley and Mako. But what's interesting, as they battle Ragnarok in the finale, both get disconnected from the device that allows them to merge in the drift and still manage to kill the monster. One of the marshals overseeing the battle states that both were destined for one another as they deliver the killing blow. So what I'm gathering by reading this is through sheer willpower and undying love for one another, they willed the jaeger to move. If this is the case, this clearly needs to be heavily explored in future volumes of the book and hopefully brought to some sort of attention in a sequel. Based on how this ended, you know, this is a married couple, and Mako and Riley at the end of Pacific Rim seem to be in love, so this seems like maybe this was written for them. So, this brings the question up, do you really need the drift to pilot these mechs? It sounds like as long as the bond between the two pilots is strong enough and they truly care for one another, it's not needed. This also might explain why Pentecost and Riley were able to move their respective Jaegers on their own after their other pilot died by experiencing high emotions for the loss of their loved ones. What's also explored with the drift with Duc and Kaori is they start off hating one another. Finding out they're perfect matches for pilots of a Jaeger continues this hatred. And then while drifting, their hatred really shows through one another as their children. Now, afterwards, Kaori, who is Japanese and you're assuming only speaks the language, somehow learns English. So, it's as if the drift imprinted it on her mind to make the connection between her and Duc stronger. At this time, I mean, they're not even in love with each other. So it's kind of a crazy twist. So if this is possible, there's no telling what the drift may be capable of. Depending on how strong the bond is between pilots, how well in sync they are. Or maybe the drift is the soul of the earth and it doesn't want to be taken over by aliens. You know, this and the fact that love willed a Jaeger to kill a monster. It sounds like something out of a Japanese anime. And guess what? Giant monsters fighting giant mechs is clearly heavily in Japanese culture. So, this is a strong possibility. Let's just hope it's not. This is The Villain's Man. I'm Justin Von Doom. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to us on YouTube, share this video, watch Pacific Rim if you haven't seen it, read Tales of Year Zero before you watch it. Keep reading, guys.